Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the State of the Campus and Alumni Town Hall. My name is Rolanda Burney, and I'll be your host this evening. Today's webinar will be recorded and available for viewing at a later date. By participating in this webinar, you are giving consent to be part of a recorded session. Please also note that this webinar has live closed captioning available. In preparation for this town hall, we ask that you submit questions in advance. We will take live questions over the next 30 minutes or so. Still, we know we cannot answer all the questions you have. As a solution, we have selected questions that are representative of prevailing themes. At the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A option available. Please feel free to post a question at any time during the webinar, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible. Please also note that the chat function will not be available, and participants' cameras and microphones will be disabled throughout the webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and now I'd like to turn things over to Chancellor Kumble Subbaswamy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming and joining us in this virtual format. It really means a great deal when, as many of you have indicated, that you want to stay in touch with what's going on the campus. We appreciate your interest. We appreciate your support. It just is, tremendously, spirit lifting for us with all that's going on our campus. Really, the best format here is question and answer. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to set the stage and talk about some good things on campus, some not so good things on campus, and then we'll open it up for questions. So let me rattle off some good things about the campus. When in the middle of March, we suddenly, literally with 5 days notice or something like that, closed the campus and went to completely being remote for all students. We really were worried about how it will affect our students. Will they be able to complete the semester successfully and make progress towards their degree? And those who needed to graduate, will they graduate in time? And all of those considerations. The good news is the completion rate for this spring was about the same as what it has been for the last 3 or 4 years. And that's really remarkable. I think it's a testament to both the resilience of our students and the dedication of our faculty and staff who supported them through this transition. The other good news is that the fall enrollment, again, there were no certainties because we didn't know exactly how we were going to start. And in fact, the transition we made to being mostly remote happened with 1 week to start. And people were really waiting to see whether they would take a year off, whether they would come or go to a place closer to them and all of that. The good news is we were only about 0.5% down in enrollment, 0.5%. That's just like 100 students or so, down from last year, which was one of our highest enrollments. And so in that sense, even though most of them are experiencing the UMass educational experience remotely, they're all sticking together, and the first-year students have, by and large, stayed with us, not taking a gap year and so on. That's good news, and it's sort of affirming to our faculty who spent considerable amount of time this summer trying to make the online experience, make the remote experience much richer for our students in terms of interactive sessions and some more innovation. And our support services, our student affairs people have worked very hard to make sure that they can still keep the students engaged and so on. So, we'll be monitoring all this obviously, but so far that news has been good. And then our research activity is up as well. I mean, up in the sense that, again, we, remember we completely shut it down in March and April, through the early part of summer. And it's back up to more than 70%, probably close to 80% in terms of people actually being in the laboratories and making all the social distance arrangements and adjustments and having the research activities take place. Then another piece of good news is that we ended fiscal year 20 with a balanced budget. That the year that ended in June 2020, we actually were able to balance that in large part thanks to the CARES Act, which really provided us, in terms of the operational expenses, approximately what's it, $18 million or so, and that really went a long way in helping us out. And then you've seen the U.S. News and World Report. We are maintaining our ranking in the mid 20s. In fact, we increased our score by 2 points, but dropped in ranking by 1 spot, which tells you how competitive things are in that grouping of major public research universities in this country, and that everyone is getting better, folks. So we can't be complacent and stay in place. And what's interesting to me, the way I look at it is that, are we grouped with the right universities? And absolutely we are, with the Marylands and with the Colorados, with the Connecticut, even, as I've mentioned, they're higher than us and so on. So the point is that we are ranked with the right group of institutions. So I feel good about that, all the work we've been doing and so on. And then sort of speaking to the present, we have a robust testing operation, and I'm sure there will be some Q&A about it that you'll learn about. We're doing about 2,000 tests per day on average, and the positivity rate so far has been 0.04%. That's compared to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at 0.8%. So we're about factor of 20 better. So all of that is sort of in the good news category. There are dark clouds, some really dark clouds as well. So the first dark cloud is we, I think, are beginning to see some super spreader events, otherwise known as parties, involving our students. They're still under study, but we think that there may have been one party where there were 40 people who may all have, in fact, been exposed, and we're doing the contact tracing to try to understand that right now. So we're gonna really have to do something about that. Our budget situation really is extremely tight. In fact, it's the tightest it has been probably in the history of the university, in the following sense. Remember that we have a large room and board operation, right? We run about 13,600 beds, and we feed about 40,000 meals a day. And so everything that is true of the hospitality industry is true on our campus. And that's a significant loss. It was room and board, I think it's on the order of $120 million in the whole. And needless to say, there is no work for people who worked in housing and dining other than the 1,100 or so students we currently have on campus. So they unfortunately had to be put on indefinite furlough. We worked with the unions closely to work out an arrangement whereby we could keep their health benefits. We could furlough them. They will be eligible for unemployment benefits, and we will be able to recall them as soon as we can without having to go through more search processes and things like that. We try to avoid layoffs because they're far worse than extended furloughs. We also had to do the same with some of our professional staff unions. And, I'll be honest with you, these are very tough for those who are facing those cuts. I mean, this is a disruption of life, disruption of livelihood. There's no way to sugarcoat this. And there are a lot of unhappy people on campus. There are some who feel we should have done more. We did everything in our power. The state has not set a full budget yet, but there are indications that, because the state is operating at approximately 12 to 15% less revenue, maybe it's a little bit less than that. We expect significant cuts to come our way in the state appropriation. We were expecting, again, some congressional help. That hasn't come by so far. And so a lot of the steps we had to take. As things stand, assuming that spring is normal, we are headed towards only about a $10 million shortfall for this fiscal year, which we can fix, I'm sure, because we have a $1.4 billion budget. This is in the noise. We can fix this. But spring, I don't think is going to be normal at all. So we've just started planning for spring, and we'll have to take that into account as we make our budget projections and so forth. I think for now, I'll just say that and only say that, because in spite of really having our attention taken up so much on the here and now of, how we're going to balance the budget now, what will spring look like and so forth, we are keeping our eyes wide open in terms of the future, because there is a future. This university has come through 157 years of ups and downs, and it'll be here for another 157 years and longer. And so we are, thinking about how do we maintain the strength of the university, preserve the good of the university and the strength of the university as we come across to the other side. And, again, there's no shortcut for quality. We are emphasizing quality in everything we do. We're also thinking about expanding our audiences. As we have told you many times, the University Without Walls umbrella has been spread wide, and the entire university now thinks of itself as a university without walls, dedicated to lifelong learning of our own alumni, but beyond that as well, to non-traditional populations. And in fact, we've seen already an uptick in our University Without Walls enrollments and the summer enrollment. We've also added some lifelong learning, professional development certificates and programs that I encourage you to take a look at. Having to do with management, improvement, organizational development, and things of that nature that you may find interesting yourself. We're going to be adding more and more of that, and want to be serving our students way well beyond after they graduate, reaching you where you are and meeting your needs. So I'm really quite excited about all that is to come. And in fact, in our next campaign that we hope to launch when the economy settles down, you will see in our case statement that we're thinking about the big problems of our society, of our world, and how a research university of our caliber, with the students that are of our caliber and our faculty of this caliber, can in fact make a difference in the world in which we live. And so I'm very excited for the future of the university, even as we keep an eye open for how we will manage the current crisis. So that said, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Burney, and she'll start the question and answers.
Thank you, Swami. So we have a few questions that were that we prepared, and then I see that we have questions coming in through the Q&A. So what I'd like to do is start with Nefertiti Walker, who's our Interim Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and our Chief Diversity Officer. Nef, your question is, what has the university done since this summer to address racial inequity?
Thank you, Rolanda. So the first step that we took as a university was to stop and listen to our students, faculty, and staff. We had meetings with various student groups, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. During these meetings, we listened to their concerns and their experiences. And through these meetings, we have collectively, as a campus leadership team and beyond, addressed the specific ways that racial inequality may be manifesting in our particular business units. We have a list of items in each of our business units, as well as we've been engaging with the deans and the chairs in various departments. But we have a list of items ranging from needing to address underrepresentation of Black and Brown students, faculty, and staff in particular areas of campus, to creating a more diverse curriculum. And another example from the Office of Equity and Inclusion is we now understand through these conversations that we've had with students in particular, but also with faculty and staff, we now understand some of the specific needs in the area of trainings. And we've been able to work with other folks across campus and other business units and work towards developing trainings that are very specific to the needs of this moment. So for instance, microaggressions is an area that we've heard from our community that we need more training in, and we're working to develop that training, both in person as well as virtual training. We also recognize that we haven't had sufficient student representation in our office in our decision-making processes. So we've added a diversity, equity, and inclusion student advisory board to our office, and these students will work in a consultative way. For much of the work that we do in our office, from developing these trainings, the students will be involved, we'll get their consultation, their input, and beyond those trainings, assessments, initiatives, programs, the students will be involved, as well as having the involvement of other folks across campus. So these are just a few of the examples of the ways, the different initiatives and programs that we've immediately started since this summer. And we're constantly focusing on both understanding the needs of the folks on campus, but also understanding the broader societal issues that are happening and ensuring that we're evolving our trainings and programs to meet the needs of both.
Thank you, Neff. John McCarthy, you have the next question. John is our Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Your question is, what feedback have you received from students about the quality of education they are getting from the virtual remote learning? Did I lose you, John?
No, I
Okay.
realized I had to turn on my own camera. I thought that would be done for me, but I'm okay now.
Thank
All right.
you.
So thank you, Dr. Burney. Over the summer, we undertook an extensive campaign of preparing faculty for remote instruction in the fall. This training included webinars, individual consultations on course design, and establishment of quality standards based on best practices in remote instruction. The faculty uptake on these resources was remarkable. Over 1,100 of our faculty took the webinar. Nearly 600 faculty consulted with our experts on online course design and development. They sent our experts over 5,500 emails and had over 400 Zoom drop-ins. In this training, we particularly emphasized the importance of student engagement, opportunities for live, synchronous interaction with the faculty member and with each other. This is critically important because the normal on-campus interactions are not available to these remote students. We need to give them an experience that's as close as possible to what they would have in a face-to-face classroom. We haven't yet surveyed our students about their experience. That we'll do that in a few weeks. But the evidence so far is that all this preparation by our faculty and by us has paid off. I'll cite two facts. Fact number one, the Chancellor alluded to this earlier, it's our enrollment. During the first 2 weeks of the semester, the add drop period, a student can walk away and not owe us any tuition if they're not happy with the education they're getting. So I'll tell you what happened this year. On August 24th, the first day of classes, we had 24,061 undergrads enrolled. On Labor Day, the end of add drop, we had 24,300 undergrads enrolled, a few more. We must be doing something right. Fact number two, and this was a surprise to me. On Monday, I met with the leadership of our Student Government Association, and they told me that students feel they're being overworked in their courses, their online courses. Well, students often feel overworked, but it turns out this is a really interesting way they're overworked. Faculty are using the scheduled course time for live synchronous discussion, breakout rooms, and other high-impact practices that foster student engagement. But the faculty are also recording their lectures for students to watch outside the regular class time. So the students feel like they're being made to go to class twice, once live with the professor, and then again in watching the recorded lecture. When I heard this from the students, I said, this is a good problem to have. The faculty have gotten the message about the importance of student engagement, and they're responding well. We can talk to them about dialing the workload back a bit, but otherwise keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thanks, John. You can add my name to the list of people who feel like it's a lot of work during COVID, but that's fine. I'm happy to have it. Our next question goes to Steve Goodwin. Steve is our Deputy Chancellor and Chief Planning Officer. And your question, Steve, is what does COVID-19 testing on campus look like? Who can get tested? And what steps are being taken to protect the local population?
Thanks. And Rolanda, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, but it really is true. The university can be, and especially our alumni, can be really proud of the testing program that we've put into place. You know, 2 months ago, we didn't have a testing program, and we created the Public Health Promotion Center basically out of whole cloth. And now they've done 50,000 tests in just a very short 4 weeks that we've been open as a campus, and they're doing an amazing job. So I think, first of all, we ought to acknowledge the efforts of Jeff Heschkock, who's our Executive Director of Environmental Health and Safety, and also Ann Becker, who's our Chief Public Health Nurse, because they have put together an amazing team. And one of the greatest things about it is the team they put together in large measure consists of students from our nursing program and students from public health who are working on taking the samples that are required to do the testing, that are working on contact tracing and working on all the follow-up that needs to be done. So they're doing a really great job. And of course, it's a terrific experience for them as students as well. Now, currently, after we take the samples, and we're doing it out of the Mullen Center for all of the asymptomatic testing, after we take those samples, they get couried into Cambridge, and they're being analyzed by the Broad Institute. But we're also in the process of switching over, and shortly we will be developing internal testing capacity through the Institute of Applied Life Sciences as well. So both of those things are in process right now. Now, I mentioned we've done over 50,000 tests on our biggest test in one day. And so far, we've had about 28 positive cases. So it's not unexpected. We knew there would be some positive cases, but the fact that we're doing as much contact tracing as we're doing on those positive cases really puts us in a position to try to hold down the spread of the virus within our region. Currently, all of the students, both those students who are living on campus and those students who are taking face-to-face classes, as well as all the students who are living in the region but not just taking their classes remotely, we're asking them to come in to be tested twice a week. We're getting very good compliance on that, and we continue to push on that to make sure we do as much testing of those students as we can. In addition, we're offering twice a week testing to all the faculty who are teaching those face-to-face classes, and then faculty who are working in research laboratories, graduate students. We're testing our staff who have exposure on our campus as well, because many of them do need to be on site. We're testing all of those individuals once a week as well. In addition, we provide symptomatic testing for anybody in the university community. So anybody who feels that they might have symptoms related to infection with COVID-19 can come into the university health services and get tested right away. And that's really important because we want to make sure we get on top of everybody who might have been infected with this virus. So through this extensive tracing, through our ability to quarantine and isolate students, we're working very hard to keep down the impact, not only on the campus, but also in our community in the region as well. This is really important as we try to move forward and make sure we can keep the university open through Thanksgiving. So thanks for the chance to answer that one, Rolanda.
Thank you, Steve. I'm appreciative. I've been tested 3 times, and so far so good, and it's helped me conduct myself accordingly when I'm not on campus.
Well, keep on coming in.
The next question goes to Brandy Hepner-LeBlanc. She's our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Campus Life. So Brandy, your question is, how has the university engaged with all students, including those with disabilities, shelter insecurity, or in need of financial assistance, to make sure that they feel connected to the university during this time?
Thank you, Dr. Burney. We have been very active in our efforts to support students with financial, housing, and or food insecurity. And our efforts predate COVID because they're perennial concerns for student affairs, but we have certainly seen an uptick in these needs. So a few initiatives of note: our Student Care Emergency Response Fund has provided microgrants and short-term loans to students in need. In the spring of 2020, we dispersed more grants than in all of the previous academic year. And we're grateful for the support that the fund gets from our community, including many of you alumni. So thank you for your donations. As far as the housing insecurity goes, from the beginning, as the first waves of the pandemic reached the United States, we started planning for a de-densified campus. We knew that we needed to continue to provide residence hall space to our students with housing insecurity. Sorry about the dog in the background. Students in the foster care system, those with unsafe conditions at home and are off campus, and others who rely on the university for food or shelter, were always invited to remain on campus, and that will continue to be our position as it has been here in the fall. Our commitment to students in need extends further into the community beyond those living in residence, meaning that our student supply closet provides access to basic toiletries, household items, cleaning supplies, and basic necessities of independent living. So while access to those supply closets have been drawn back to just one location now in our Dean of Students office, we work with other campus partners to stock those that closet and to make sure that hard to come by resources like hand sanitizer and bleach wipes are available to students in need. I do want to do a little shout out to one of our registered student organizations, the Food Recovery Network. They continue to recover leftover food from our dining halls. So a shout out to our dining program as well. And they donate those foods to the student and community members in need. So they're focused not only on food waste, but building a stronger relationship with our administration to foster a mutually beneficial relationship is really of note. So also want to mention our connection with students with disabilities. Because of the remote learning format, new challenges, of course, and opportunities would be presented for students working with disability services. So beginning over the summer, disability services staff started outreach to students to encourage them to enroll before the start of the semester so that we could carefully plan their coursework and the needs that they would have. Disability Services has also worked close with the folks on the IDEAS team and academic affairs to address captioning needs for all instructional media formats and have amended their processes for exam proctoring accommodations to adapt to the remote learning community. So connection is a concern for all of these students, all of our students during this pandemic. Our work in student affairs has really coalesced this year around the theme of connection, and all of our offices have taken up the charge that we must foster community development and provide safe, supportive spaces, particularly for our BIPOC, LGBTQ students as they carry additional stress in the midst of ongoing, highly public issues of racial justice. Most notably, I'll mention is My Crew, which stands for Campus Residential Unit or Campus Remote Unit, depending on where the student is situated, that exists for our first-year students and transfer students, and Project Connect for our multi-year students. These are micro groups of students that we have created with peer leaders. They gather weekly to check in and follow a curriculum aimed at academic success, building an inclusive community, and well-being. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. And you can tell your big puppy Hank I said hello. The next question goes to our athletic director, Ryan Bamford. And the question is, have there been any discussions about a return to sports this winter?
Thank you, Dr. Burney. Appreciate the opportunity to be with so many people who support us and especially during this challenging environment and challenging time. Thankfully, there have been a number of discussions regarding return to play for a number of our sports, including our men's and women's basketball programs and our ice hockey program, the three winter sports right now that will hopefully be playing games this semester. At the recommendation of the Division I men's and women's basketball oversight committees at the NCAA level, our national governing body, last week, those seasons are allowed to start on November 25th of 2020. And while their seasons have been reduced by 4 contests, we are hopeful that we're going to be able to play from the end of November through March and hopefully have March Madness this year, which I know we all love to follow. Currently working with the Hockey East Conference on all the ice hockey initiatives to get our season up and going. We're in the middle of deliberation about when that season will begin. I anticipate that you can expect a late November start date for our ice hockey program as well. For all 3 of those sports at this moment, we're not going to be having fans in attendance at the arena for COVID reasons and making sure that we're following all of the protocols for campus. For our Olympic sports, the remaining ones that were to play winter athletics on our campus, we're waiting for the Atlantic 10 to make a decision, which is our lead all-sport conference, to make a decision along with the NCAA on sports like indoor track and field and swimming and diving on what those competitive seasons and championship segments will look like. In addition, this week, some good news. You may have seen it on Monday. Because of the hard work of our coaches, staff, and student athletes, our football team will be resuming play this fall. We have every intention to try to get some games in later in the fall with a start date probably mid to late October and play a handful of games prior to the end of the fall football season. It became apparent after our announcement on August 11th when we planned to move football games to the spring that with 90% of our FBS peers playing football in the fall, that our best opportunity to play games was going to be in this fall segment. And so we will move forward with football, ice hockey, men's and women's basketball as 4 teams to start out our 2020-2021 academic year. Their seasons hopefully will get underway here in the next 2 months. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. So it's 6 o'clock now, 6:01 now, and we have a few more minutes, and I know I have a couple of questions from the floor and maybe about 4 or 5 questions that I may or may not be able to get to that we prepared ahead of time. So I'm going to ask for your patience. I'm going to take this one question from the floor right now, and I think maybe Provost McCarthy, you can answer it, or Brandy. Listen to the question and somebody just raise your hand. Okay. Will students who are
Wait, Brandy has to turn on a camera or we can't see her raise her hand.
Right. Will students who are living on campus face consequences for the parties mentioned in the chancellor's remarks?
Oh, that's Brandy.
Brandy.
See how quickly he did that?
And turned off his camera.
So, you know, we have a student code of conduct. We have a conduct process to address, you know, egregious behavior. But I think it's important that I mention that, you know, it's a delicate balance. We want students to continue to test. We want students to understand that their behavior matters. And so what we start with is that educational conversation, and we try to work with students. So for instance, mainly what we've seen on campus are students, you know, leaving the room and forgetting their mask, that sort of thing. That is something that, you know, we want to handle within our residence halls and have the staff there have a conversation of why that's important to those that live around them. And frankly, what we're finding is after those conversations, we have really good compliance. It's like most of us, we've made the mistake. So we do have the tools to go further if we need to. There have been referrals to conducts for the more egregious behavior. But in general, I think it's really important to state that you know, the heavy hand is not necessarily the best approach, and that we really do need to stay centered as an educational institution through this process.
So Rolanda, I just want to add one little bit to that. I mean, absolutely, you know, I think Vice Chancellor LeBlanc hit it on the nail. One other aspect is we really want people to help us with contact tracing. We want them to trust us. We want them to tell the truth about how many people they have interacted with, where they have been, and so on. So if you really start taking a very heavy-handed approach right away, in all likelihood, people will not help us honestly and candidly in terms of contact tracing, which is worse, in fact, because if we know, we can actually try to control it. So in that sense, there are lots of delicate balances here. We certainly are also, you know, learning from the experience of other universities. We know what Northeastern did. We know what many other institutions have done, and so on. So we're watching and learning. But again, there are multiple balances to strike here.
Thank you, Brandy and Swami. So I'm going to ask that the remaining questions, if you could truncate long answers. I am going to call on Mike Malone, who is our Vice Chancellor for Research and Engagement. And the question is, has research continued on campus? And if so, how have researchers been supported and kept safe during the pandemic?
Thank you, Dr. Burney. Good evening, everyone. We have, in fact, continued some research on campus, very low levels, of course, in March, just enough to have continuity of our programs to preserve equipment, animals, plants, cell lines, with an eye towards opening back up as quickly as circumstances allowed. We are doing everything from mid-March to mid-May remotely, quite a lot actually. During that period, faculty wrote 339 proposals. They didn't slow them at all. Some programs like in computer science or more theoretical programs continued full pace remotely. We started opening up in the last half of May, very gradually and with very detailed planning of operations. Everyone who's on campus is part of a formal operating plan that's reviewed and approved by environmental health and safety departments and deans in my office. It includes what you might imagine: PPE, extra cleaning, social distancing. Groups are working at pretty low density in shifts or pods, some people would say, so that the same people always work together to facilitate contact tracing. By mid-August, we had about 1,600 people back on campus, and today we have more than 2,000. As the Deputy Chancellor mentioned, all the participants are being tested at least once a week, and many of them twice a week if they're in high-risk groups. Fortunately, we had one case of COVID involving a researcher in April. That person was working alone. There was no other campus exposure. They had contracted it in the community. And since then, fortunately, we've had no positive cases in the research community, I'm happy to say.
Thank you, Mike. So I have another question from the floor, and I think this time the provost can't get out of it. So the question is, what is the university doing to ensure the ease of access and future attendance of international students?
This is very challenging because of the fact that for a long time, the U.S. consular apparatus that would issue visas was closed. It has begun reopening, starting with India. We continue to maintain contact with our students abroad. Some of them, many of them, in fact, are studying remotely from their home country. And our faculty are accommodating them by teaching at unusual times of the day. My wife, for example, is a faculty member, and she's not a morning person, but she is now because of the students that she's teaching who live abroad. We are hoping to bring those students back to campus as soon as possible. They are important to us, and we think that they are going to be part of our campus going forward.
Thank you, John. The next question goes to Steve Goodwin. On the topic of inviting students to campus for the spring semester, how and when will that decision be made?
Well, I feel like we've been working on that decision since before we even brought the students back for the fall semester. And just recently, the Chancellor put out his plan for the process for doing the planning around spring. So there'll be a strategic planning committee that's going to be chaired by the provost and the vice chancellor for student affairs and campus life, both of whom you've heard from tonight. And that'll start convening tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So we're just about ready to start jumping on that right now. We're going to learn a lot, as the Chancellor said. We're learning a lot from all the things that we're doing this semester, and we're also learning a lot from all the things that the other campuses are doing, and we'll pay close attention to that throughout this entire process. I haven't talked to everybody on the campus, but I'm pretty sure I'm safe in saying that everybody on the campus wants to find a way to bring back as many students in the spring as we can possibly bring back to participate in the student experience and do it in a way that ensures the safety of the students, of the staff, of the faculty, and of our community. And so we'll all be working towards that same goal. So all of the things that we're doing now are really geared towards helping to ensure that we'll be in a good position to have a very vigorous spring semester.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so it's 6:09, and we'll see if Mark Fuller can wrap this up with the next two questions in the next 5 minutes. Mark is Mark, he's our Vice Chancellor for Advancement. Mark, your question is, how can I be comfortable donating to the university, knowing that some employees are being furloughed indefinitely despite a sizable endowment?
Yeah, thank you, Rolanda. That's a great question. And it's actually interesting. There was an article in the Boston Globe today that also addressed this. The challenge and the good thing, but the challenge with an endowment is most all of those funds, the vast, vast, vast majority, are given with donor intent and restrictions. So many of the people probably on this call have supported the university, whether it's athletics, whether it's student scholarships for need-based students, et cetera. And all of that money, whether it's current giving or it's endowment support, comes with restrictions intact. So if I were to create a scholarship for a need-based student studying the life sciences from the greater Boston area, we're not allowed to use that money in any capacity other than what the money is generally directed towards. It's what we call restricted funds. And the endowment for the system, not just UMass Amherst, but the endowment for the system is about $1 billion. The endowment for the campus is about $350 million for the Amherst campus, but virtually all of that money has contractual obligations surrounding it that does not allow it to be used for general operating funds. So that's, I don't know if that was sufficiently truncated, Rolanda, but you might have called on the wrong person for that. So that's how our endowment works. And so that really ties our hands in terms of how we can use those sorts of monies from gifts. So was that the question by and large?
It was. And also I have what is going to be the final question from our standpoint for me. How can I support students and the university during these times of uncertainty?
Well, that's a question near and dear to my heart, especially in my current position. You know, there are three primary things that come in for the campus in terms of support from alumni that are very, very meaningful. One is student support that makes education more accessible. Another is sort of faculty support that allows us to attract talent to teach those students. And, you know, the third thing is program support as we try to stay on the cutting edge, you know, of research and education. And so all of those things, our alumni, I will be honest, have stepped up in this time. While we had anticipated that, you know, given all the uncertainty in society and everything that's happening with the pandemic, that giving might be decreasing, we've actually seen a lot of alumni step up to help out the students that maybe where their families have been affected by the pandemic, losing their jobs, et cetera. So we've had a lot of activity in new scholarship support. So if you are interested in helping some of the what I think is the best and finest students I've ever been around in my entire academic career, and that includes my time as when I was Dean of Eisenberg, you know, you reach out to us. Oops, don't know what happened, but just reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you help some of our fine students.
All righty, well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our participants for joining us this evening. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to the Chancellor, who will have closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolanda. It's really, I hope it has been a useful exchange. And again, I know there are a lot more questions than we were able to answer. And if these are not collected in some way, I mean, because it's recorded, I think we probably collect them. We will try to answer them, you know, through other means, because I believe in a very open and transparent, you know, university. And so we'll try to answer that. And if you want to drop a note either to Alumni Affairs to Mark Fuller or my office, chancellor@umass.edu, you should feel free to do so. You know, we will always give you an answer. You may not like the answer, but we will give you, you know, our honest answer. And again, it's so important for us that you stay engaged with us. Yes, we really do want your support. And again, you know, as Mark said, you have to remember that a lot of the financial support that we give our students, bulk of it really is, I mean, apart from the federal programs and so on, is from our own internal operating funds, the discounting so-called. So the need-based financial aid is heavily another piece that we always try to preserve. And that is in turn, you know, puts the ultimate pressure on our operating budget. So the more money you give to student scholarships, we can find some relief from the operating budget that's now supporting the need-based scholarships as well. So that really does make a big difference. And then, ultimately, talent, it's all about, we've frozen so many faculty and staff positions that's another impact on the overall quality and the operation. You can't continue to keep those things frozen forever. And so again, having operating cash helps. So yes, I mean, money, whether it comes from Congress, whether it comes from the state, or whether it comes from friends and alumni and corporate partners, all really do help at any time, but certainly at a time like this. But again, I want to thank you for staying engaged, being curious about the university, being interested in the welfare of the students, faculty, and students. And we're actually interested in your welfare. If there's anything we can do through Alumni Affairs to help support you, please let us know as well. And thank you. And be safe and have a great weekend.